been there. Like it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. Inside that barrel was a woman. A real woman with a real name, a real family, and a real life that had been reduced to 85 pounds of sealed silence because a man she had trusted decided she was no longer useful to him. And that barrel wasn't even the worst discovery that day. There were 5 of them. 5 barrels, 5 women, stacked and stored and hidden across 2 states by a man who, on any given Sunday morning, could be found sitting in the 3rd pew of his local church in a neat button-down shirt, nodding along to the sermon with his wife of 40 years beside him. His neighbors described him as friendly, helpful, the kind of man who waved from his driveway. His community knew him as a volunteer, a youth worker, a business place where millions of ordinary people spent their evenings in the late 1990s. Online, his username was Slavemaster, and John Edward Roberts believed the real number is higher, much higher. And for 16 years, he sat in his suburban Kansas house, coached his grandchildren's sports teams, and kept his secrets locked in barrel. Because this one is about more than one man's crimes. The Perfect Mask. Cicero, Illinois. 1943. John Edward Robinson was born the 3rd of 5 children into a working-class family with an alcoholic father and a strict, cold mother. On paper, it was not a particularly unusual childhood for the era. Many children grew up in households like that and became perfectly decent human beings. But Robinson's childhood produced something different. By 13, he was an Eagle Scout, disciplined, organized, already skilled at presenting a version of himself that people wanted to see. He even performed before Queen Elizabeth II during a scout trip to London. It was an early lesson in image management that he would spend the rest of his life perfecting. He dropped out of a Catholic seminary. He dropped out of radiology school. He lied about his credentials and got a job at a children's hospital in Kansas City using forged documents. And then, in 1964, he married a woman named Nancy Jo Lynch and settled into what looked, from the outside, like an ordinary suburban life. What Nancy didn't know, what she wouldn't know for decades, was that she had married a man who was incapable of living honestly. Not just unwilling, incapable. Through the 1960s and 70s, Robinson ran a series of fraudulent businesses. He embezzled from employers. He forged documents. He defrauded investors. He was convicted multiple times. Small financial crimes, white-collar stuff, the kind that got him probation and community service, and a reputation as a guy who bent the rules, but nothing more serious than that. Each time he got caught, he charmed his way through the legal system, said the right things to the right people, and walked back out into his neighborhood like nothing had happened. He served on community boards. He volunteered with youth organizations. He received local civic awards. He was, to everyone who saw him, a good man who had made some business mistakes. But through all of it, through the fraud and the probation and the civic awards, something darker was building underneath. Something that the financial crimes had only been a rehearsal for. Because John Robinson had learned the single most dangerous lesson a predator can learn, that if you control how people see you, you can do almost anything. The first disappearances. Overland Park, Kansas. Robinson had set up yet another fraudulent shell company, a management consulting firm he called Equi2. It existed mostly on paper, the way all his businesses did. But it gave him something valuable, a reason to approach young women with job offers. His first known victim was 19 years old. Her name was Paula Godfrey. She was ambitious, eager to start her career, and Robinson presented himself as a businessman who could give her a leg up. He picked her up on the 1st of September 1984, supposedly to drive her to the airport for a business training trip. Paula Godfrey was never seen again. A few days after she disappeared, her parents received a typed letter. It had Paula's signature at the bottom. It said she was fine, that she didn't want contact with her family, that Robinson had been a great help to her and she was moving on with her life. Her parents knew something was wrong. They went to the police. The police looked at the letter, noted that Paula was a legal adult, found no evidence of foul play, and closed the investigation. Robinson had learned something enormous from that moment, something that would define his entire operational method for the next 16 years. Bureaucracy could be beaten with paper. A typed letter, a forged signature, an adult woman. No evidence of a crime. Case closed. He did it again in 1985. This time, his victim was a 19-year-old single mother named Lisa Stasi. She had a 4-month-old daughter, a baby girl named Tiffany. Lisa was living in a shelter for homeless women in Kansas City, desperate for stability, when Robinson approached her using an alias, John Osborne. He told her he ran a charitable program that helped young mothers get back on their feet. He said he could get her a job, an apartment, and a fresh start in Chicago. Lisa Stasi checked into a motel room that Robinson arranged and paid for. A few days later, Robinson told his own brother that a young woman had committed suicide and left behind an infant who needed a home. He offered the baby Tiffany Stasi for adoption. He charged his brother over $5,000 in fake legal fees. Lisa Stasi was never seen again. Baby Tiffany was renamed Heather Robinson and grew up believing she was the legitimate adopted niece of John Edward Robinson. She would not learn the truth about her real identity until she was 15 years old, when her uncle was arrested for murder and investigators matched her DNA to Lisa Stasi's family. Years later, as an adult, Heather Robinson reflected on something her uncle had done in the final year before his arrest. He had started asking her sexual questions. He had offered to fly her out to stay with him. She said it plainly. If she had gone, she would be dead. She would be in a barrel. He had killed her mother, and then he had raised her, and then he had started looking at her the way he had looked at his victims. John Robinson did not have a type in the traditional sense. He had a target profile: vulnerable women, women who needed something: money, stability, love, excitement, escape. Women who were willing to trust a man who seemed to have the answers to all of their problems. And he was extraordinarily good at finding them. The internet changes everything. The mid-1990s changed John Robinson's world in a way he could not have designed better himself. The internet arrived in American homes, and with it came something that was, for a predator of Robinson's particular skill set, almost too good to be true. Anonymity, the ability to be anyone, the ability to reach anyone, the ability to build trust with a person over weeks and months of carefully crafted messages before they ever looked you in the eye. Robinson dove in head first. He found his way to BDSM chat rooms, online spaces where people explored dominant and submissive relationship dynamics. He created a persona called Slavemaster, and in those chat rooms, he was electric, confident, authoritative, sophisticated. He described himself as a wealthy businessman with a farm in Kansas, a powerful man who could offer women a real master-slave relationship and the financial security to go with it. He was 50 years old, living in a suburban house, stealing from his neighbors and hiding bodies in barrels. But online, he was whoever they needed him to be. Until trust became control, slowly, patiently, with great attention to what each individual needed. He sent gifts. He wrote long, detailed messages that demonstrated knowledge and understanding. He made women feel seen, chosen, special. He talked about contracts and rules and the kind of structured relationship that people in that community genuinely sought. And when women flew to Kansas to meet him, some from halfway across the country, some from other countries entirely, they arrived believing they had found someone real. One of them was a young Polish woman named Izabela Lewicka, 21 years old. She had moved to the United States from Poland, full of excitement about her new life. She met Robinson online in 1997. Flew to Kansas to be with him, and within months had signed a contract, a real, physical document that effectively signed her life over to him. She told her family she was deeply happy, that she had found someone extraordinary, that she was exactly where she wanted to be. Her family never heard from her again after 1999. Another was Suzette Troughton, a nurse from Michigan. Bright, adventurous, trusting. She and Robinson had exchanged hundreds of messages before she flew to Kansas in February 2000. She told her mother she had found a wonderful man, that she was excited, that everything was going to be great. She was dead within weeks. Robinson put their bodies in barrels and drove them to his farm near Lasigne, Kansas. And then he went home to his wife, sat down for dinner, and continued being the man everyone thought he was. The wall finally cracks. By 1999, investigators in Kansas and Missouri had started noticing something. John Robinson's name kept coming up. Not in any one dramatic investigation, not in any single case that pointed directly at him, but across multiple missing persons files, women who had last been seen in contact with a man named John Robinson, women who had sent their families reassuring letters or emails that felt slightly off, women whose trails went cold in ways that didn't quite add up. Robinson's name appeared again and again like a thread running through separate tapestries. Detective John Brown of the Lenexa Police Department in Kansas began pulling those threads together. He started building a file, quietly, carefully, methodically. He knew he needed more than patterns. He needed evidence, and Robinson was extraordinarily careful about leaving evidence behind. Then, in the spring of 2000, two women came forward. Both had been in relationships with Robinson. Both had survived. One filed a sexual battery complaint. The other reported that Robinson had stolen her sex toys, a detail so mundane and almost darkly absurd that it could easily have been dismissed. It wasn't dismissed. The theft charge gave Detective Brown exactly what he needed, probable cause for a search warrant. On the 2nd of June 2000, investigators descended on Robinson's farm near LaSigne, Kansas. They found two barrels. Inside them were the remains of Isabella Lewica. In January 2003, he was sentenced to death for the murders of Isabella Lewica and Suzette Troughton. Additional life sentences were added for the Missouri killings as part of a plea agreement. John Edward Robinson is 81 years old today. He sits on death row at El Dorado Correctional Facility in Kansas. His appeals have dragged through the courts for decades. His wife Nancy divorced him in 2005 after 40 years of marriage and a lifetime of not knowing the man she shared her bed with. His niece, the woman he raised as Heather Robinson, who was actually Tiffany Stasi, daughter of one of his first victims, has spent her adult life trying to rebuild an identity that was stolen before she was old enough to walk. She has said that she believes she would be dead if she had accepted his offer to visit him before his arrest. She is probably right. The weight of what's left. Here is what keeps this case from being neatly closed. The bodies that were never found. Paula Godfrey, Robinson's first known victim, disappeared in 1984. No remains have ever been located. She has never been found. Somewhere in the world, there's either a grave that hasn't been opened yet, or a woman who managed to escape and never came forward, and investigators believe this is the most likely another barrel that was never discovered. And Paula is probably not alone. Robinson operated for 16 years. He was meticulous, organized, experienced. He had a farm with acres of land. He had storage units in multiple states. He had a network of shell companies that gave him reasons to travel and reasons to explain away any questions about his activities. The women investigators know about are almost certainly not all of the women he harmed. And that open wound, that unresolved darkness sitting beneath the solved surface of this case, is something that families are still living with today. Women who trusted a man online and were never heard from again. Cases that were never connected because the victims had no one searching for them. The last control he has is the names he won't say. He has never said them. What this story is really about. I need to talk to you directly about something. John Robinson killed his first victim in 1984. He found his last victims online in 1999 and 2000. The internet he used was clunky, slow, text-heavy. Chat rooms that looked nothing like the sleek, immediate platforms we use today. And yet, the method he used is more relevant now than it has ever been. Think about how many conversations you have had with people online, on dating apps, in forums, in comment sections, DMs, social media exchanges. Think about how much of a person's identity you accept on faith when you interact with them digitally. You accept their name, you accept their photo, you accept their story. You accept that they are who they say they are because you have no other option. John Robinson understood that vulnerability 25 years ago. He understood that online, image is everything, and verification is almost nothing. He built a persona called Slavemaster that was authoritative and exciting and exactly what his victims were looking for, and he maintained it over months and years until the trust he had cultivated was so deep that women crossed state lines and signed over control of their lives to a man they had never met in person. He proved something that every single online predator since him has used as a blueprint, that you can build trust with a complete stranger more quickly and more deeply through a screen than through almost any other medium. Because the screen lets you edit yourself. You show only what you choose. You reveal only what serves you. And by the time the other person realizes that the image doesn't match the reality, it can be far too late. Robinson is old now. His era of chat rooms feels distant, almost quaint. But the lesson he taught is permanent. Here it is, plainly. The people who prey on others online are not always the ones who seem dangerous. They are almost never the ones who seem dangerous. They are the ones who seem wonderful, attentive, understanding, generous, perfectly calibrated to whatever you need at that moment in your life. That calibration is not love. It is reconnaissance. Real connection is built over time, in multiple contexts, with people who know you in more than one dimension. If someone in your online life has never existed for you outside of the frame they control, if you only know them how they want to be known, that is worth paying attention to. And if that person starts asking you to move closer, keep secrets, sign things, travel to them, cut contact with the people in your life who know you best. Stop. Tell someone where you are and who you're talking to. Because John Robinson chose his victims carefully. He chose people who were searching for something. He chose people who were willing to hope. He chose people who, for whatever reason, were a little more isolated than most. He chose people who wouldn't be missed quickly enough. Don't be someone who isn't missed. Tell your people where you are. Stay connected to the people who knew you before the screen. 8 women deserved that protection and didn't get it. You still can.